Welcome to the Johnny Dell Football Academy podcast on the channel that's trying to answer the whys and hows of the game by talking through and dissecting game film and diving deeper to explain why the X's zig and the O's zag. I am Adam Marino, joined by Mr. Johnny Dell, and we are reminding you, as always, the most fun way to watch is on YouTube, where we go live. There you can comment into the live show. Be sure to hit the notification bell and turn on your notifications so you can be a part of the conversation. We also stream live on Facebook and X. Also, the audio versions are always found on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, if you are live with us in the chat, it's probably because you are subscribed, you've hit the notification bell, and turned those notifications on. So, when sharing with your friends, be sure to let them know. We also love to hear from you outside of our live show. Email us at johnnydellsfootballacademy@gmail.com, and you can always check out the website jfa49.com, as it is the most fun way to support the channel. Also, the way we boost the chat and boost the algorithm is to type out hashtag beware the Ides of March, as tomorrow is the first day of March. We are flying by, complaining about the lull of the offseason. It's already freaking March, people. Today is Friday, February 28th. It is the Johnny Dell Football Academy podcast. I am Adam Marino, of course. You know the deal. Hashtag JD49 to boost the algorithm like Michael Norris just did. Let's go. He's fired up. We're all fired up. I don't know what I'm fired up about. I really don't care that much about the combine, I'll be honest. But
which
I'm
is
just
funny
happy to be
because
here.
last year you were all like, I'm going to go to the combine. I could go to the combine. And now you're like, I don't really care that much.
It's the Underwear Olympics. Tune
The
into
Underwear Olympics.
yesterday's episode of Sports Idiot Nation. We talk about the Underwear Olympics and a new way of a combine for a fan. So you definitely got to check that out, by the way. But all right, let's get into the combine. I kid. I am interested in the stories that come up, the GMs and coaches that talk, and the trade talks and this and that and all that. So let's get into your initial thoughts and the chat's initial thoughts about opening day yesterday in Indianapolis.
Well, I mean, look, there's always a lot of talk about different things. Kind of the Matt Stafford headlines have dominated among
Yeah.
everything, which is a little odd because the Rams aren't like none of their top guys are even at the combine. So, usually trade talks will happen there, but none of those guys are even there. But I think the biggest headline coming out from yesterday at the combine was Shamar Stewart. I mean, look, Shamar Stewart tested out of the gym, out of the stadium yesterday in a lot of ways. He was absolutely impressive in all of his scores. 1.58 10-yard split. To put that in perspective, Nick Bosa's 10-yard split was 1.59. Sub 1.6 10-yard split is usually elite edge rusher type scores. You're looking at, guys like Von Miller was like 1.557, I think, or 1.58. Myles Garrett was 1.58. Obviously I said Nick Bosa, I think 1.59. That starts creeping into that elite, 10-yard split, which is really, that's all that scouts and teams really usually care about with defensive ends. They don't care as much about their 40-yard dash. It still does play into it, but they really worry about, for obvious reasons, how quickly can you cover 10 yards? And so that was, that's there. He had a 40-inch vertical leap. So super explosive athlete, 10-foot, 11-inch vertical. I mean, we're just talking really his measurables coming out, at least at the combine, are right on par with one Myles Garrett. And he's doing this at 267 pounds. I think the surprise for everybody is some of these, because he didn't show quite this level of athleticism on tape when he was at Texas A&M. Now, we also have to understand at Texas A&M, he was weighing in closer to 290. And yesterday at the combine, this week at the combine, he weighed in at 267. So he is 23 pounds lighter. It appears that him playing at this weight is really his ideal weight, that he shed a lot of excess weight and is moving faster, is moving more explosive, and is really making himself a lot of money and moving himself up in the first round. So the concern is the production. There's not a lot of sacks in college, but he has a whole lot of pressures. And I think, again, some of that is playing at 290, not 267. There's also, as I'm just quickly before we're going on here, watching their game against Notre Dame, I'm seeing a lot of quick passes. And so there's pressures that are there, but the quarterback's getting rid of the ball before the game, the sack can be closed. And so like there is some issues there with production, but he's also got a lot of pressure. So I don't always say, this is only on the player. It's also sacks are really come down to a team thing. And Shamar Stewart has really made a compelling case. And we also have to back this up and remember, he was somebody that I mentioned all week at the Senior Bowl. When we were there, Adam, if you remember, we were doing shows after every game, every day practice. And he was always one of the guys that I would mention. I say, Shamar Stewart really is showing up to the point we even had a discussion on here because there was some confusion on which Shamar we were talking about. But he flashed every day at the Senior Bowl. He flashed in the 11-on-11s. He flashed in the 1-on-1s. He flashed in the defensive line drills. So this isn't just, okay, college tape, not a lot of production in there, but he's testing really, really well at the combine is why everything's shooting up. It's stacking that you did have a lot of pressures there. You've cut weight. You show up at the Senior Bowl. You have a phenomenal week at the Senior Bowl. I mean, he absolutely destroyed Josh Connerly in a 1-on-1, who is projected to be a higher first round or higher tackle in this draft. I don't know if he's going to go first round. We'll see. Many people have mentioned him as a potential first. And he absolutely destroyed him. And he said after that practice that he told him he was going to bull rush him. He said, I told him I was going to run through his face, and then I did. It wasn't like I set him up with a speed move and then ran through him. I told him I was going to run through him, and then I did. And so, you have that week of the Senior Bowl where there is very good production. So much so that his Senior Bowl was so impressive after just 2 days that he left early. He said, I came and I showed what I needed to show. I don't need to risk injury. I'm moving out and going back to training. That is, that's how good his Senior Bowl week was. So this combine is coming on the tails of that. This isn't, and that's where the combine can be valuable. It's not just the college tape. It's not just the Senior Bowl. It's not just the combine. It's all of these things put together, and then it's the interviews. And so, this isn't a single faceted thing. You can have guys who don't have a lot of production in college who they nail all those other things, and then they become a really good player. You have some guys who have really good production in college. They flunk all the other things, and everybody says, well, they had a lot of production in college. Then they go to the NFL and they fail out. So, this is a multifaceted thing going on here. But Shamar Stewart has really kind of opened a lot of eyes or really raised a lot of eyebrows here at the combine yesterday.
So a lot of talk in the chat. Remember, if you are watching live, it's probably because you've hit the notification bell. So the chat is asking, I mean, are we going to pick a DB? What's going on? Like, nothing has, been. It's way too early to tell. It's fun to talk about, but was there someone else in the combine that you saw that you're like, okay, I'm making a wish here. It'd be cool to have this guy. Was there anyone else?
Well, I think we'll move to that. I just want to show some of this, some of the stuff here from Shamar Stewart. So because like what is people are saying and what's true and what I've mentioned is, the college production wasn't really there. So let's look at some of this here. So
Only
here
4 sacks.
here you have Shamar Stewart. He's playing right end. here against Notre Dame. And you're going to see the burst is there. He's got the dip. Okay. So he's going to come in. Let me slow this down for everybody so we can see it. You're going to see the ability to dip and bend. He's going to attack the tackle, set him up with an inside move, and then dip and bend. And this is not a sack, but this is a pressure, and it's a quality rush. You get it there. That's a win. The difference is the quarterback got rid of the ball quick. Okay. Yes, it was a bad snap, but that tackle does not win this rep in any way. If you have some better coverage, this is going to be a sack. I mean, he's basically blown right through and is right to the quarterback. That's not a sack, but Adam, would you call that a quality pass rush?
Oh, for sure. I mean, the tackle,
Okay.
yeah, is obviously beat.
Right. Okay, so here we have him playing left end. He's over here on the other side, and again, you're going to see that he's got length and he's got power, and that's
Strength.
exactly what
Yeah.
happens here. He's going to attack the tackle, set him up with a speed, and come right through him. And watch the hand placement. He's going to keep the tackle's hands off of him, bench press up, slow the tackle back, and again, the quarterback's escaping. Is that a quality rush?
Oh, yeah.
Right. Okay. Not a sack, but I think we would take that. Okay. Now he's going to be playing here on the interior. He's playing as a 4-eye. So we have him in another spot here. And we're going to see this pass rush. So he's going to go against an interior guy. And again, he's playing this at 290. And he's immediately to the quarterback. Okay. This is an immediate pressure. Again, watch the hand fighting. Immediate swipe. He's able to get it and then go. Now, this is also bad by the running back, but he beat the tackle immediately. Again.
Horrible by the running back.
Right. But is that a quality pass rush? It's not a sack. But again, if you're an NFL scout and you're watching this, are you going to say, okay, I'm seeing lack of production here? Not necessarily. You're going to say, okay, these are all quality rushes. Okay, now we have him. He's back playing right end. And here we're going to see him against the run. He's going to be able to, they're running a little read option here. So he's going to see this again. Not great tackle play here. There's some confusion, but he's going to, again, identify it and then go make the tackle. So you're going to see the explosiveness to come out here and then boom, go make the tackle, and he finishes, and he's a big man. So playing the run, playing, quality rushes here. So when we see, okay, he didn't have the production in college. Well, yeah, he had a lot of pressures. And when you have a lot of pressures and not a lot of sacks, that's not always on the player. A lot of times that's on the back end. That's on the other players having a continuity or full game plan of pass rush. You saw a couple of those. The quarterback's able to escape because you don't have a cohesive pass rush plan. So I don't necessarily say, okay, all of this is on Shamar Stewart. Look, I think you're going to see more and more of this throughout college as time goes, is that you're going to see some teams and guys that can make a lot of NIL money. You're going to see them have lower production sometimes in college, because I just personally think that this is the way that college football is going with all the NIL money, is that you have players coming in as hired guns, and you don't have as much cohesion and team approach on play. So I think you're going to end up with a bunch of guys on the defensive line that are all trying to get theirs. And so there's not this, okay, we have a stud in Shamar and we're going to let him work, and everybody else is contain and keep the quarterback in there so that he can't get away from him, sort of a deal. So again, all this to say, I'm just not convinced that the lack of college production should be an immediate, okay, we shouldn't even look at him in the first round. They need to do their homework, and I think he's made a very compelling case for himself.
One thing to keep in mind, I would say, is Johnny, of all people, could put together a pretty sweet video of Bosa not making a tackle and or sack, but you could see him wrecking the offense. You could just see it. So there,
Right.
I mean, would you say on all of these plays, you can put 25 plays together of Nick Bosa wreaking havoc and not recording a single stat, would you look at that tape and say, well, obviously Bosa's slipping. Obviously he's not as good. Would you say
Well, I
that?
mean,
Like,
people did say that last year. If you remember, Bosa wasn't having the sacks, and they also said it the year before that he wasn't having the sacks, and so he's really fallen off a cliff. People were saying that in 2023 and
it's ridiculous.
2024 because the sacks weren't coming, but at the same point, he was being doubled all the time. He was creating a lot of pressures. I mean, remember the first game against the Seahawks, Nick Bosa had 14 pressures. And
Yeah.
and Geno Smith, was running for his life most of the game.
Yeah.
Are we going to say, well, Nick Bosa didn't have the production? No, he did. There was a lot of things being produced there. We had some other issues going on that was keeping it from sacks, and also it forced 2 interceptions. So, you're not going to complain about those when you have that. Some people will, but that's why we go deeper than just sacks. It's more than just that. Those tell you part of it, but they don't tell the whole story.
Yeah, no question. I'm definitely down with this dude. I mean, Shamar does look like a stud. I don't know, at 11 we do have plenty of time to talk more about the draft and even the combine, honestly. Because Monday we'll have more stuff to talk about. This is only day 2 of it being Friday. So also, are we still wanting to get into our next level? We did D line and linebackers as well on Monday.
Well, I think we're going to stick with a combine for right now because there's just so much to really get into. Another guy that I talked about him last game or last show, showed a bunch of clips. This is Jamari Caldwell. Okay, kid continues to show a lot of impressiveness here at the combine. This is going to be just a movement drill that they do at the combine. Remember, Jamari Caldwell is 332 pounds. And so let's watch Jamari Caldwell move
Jeez,
here.
his
Again,
legs.
I mean, yeah, this is a massive. That's a great point to pause. But just watch how he moves. This is from the combine. This is a 332-pound defensive tackle that is able to move side to side. Again, let's watch this. The hips, the feet. This kid can move. I mean, 332 pounds. His tape is phenomenal. Phenomenal tape. He did pretty well in the 10-yard split. He had a phenomenal week at the Senior Bowl. This is somebody that is really turning into maybe my biggest draft crush of this cycle.
Oh, really?
I have not found anything that as I've been following and watching this kid, and plus he followed me back on X, which is great. So we may see if we can get him on the channel. But I haven't seen anything that I don't like. I've watched 4 of their games, and I'm not going, okay, this concerns me. He's very technically sound. He plays unselfish ball. He's performing well at the combine. He can move. He does I guess the only downside is that I don't see him as being end up being one of those premier rusher types. But this is where I get really excited about this draft class specifically. Is I go, okay, if you can get a Shamar Stewart or any of the other edge guys, Oluwafemi Oladejo, I really like him out of UCLA. I think he's got tons of upside as an edge player. Just a number of these edge guys, I go, okay, you pair you pair one of those guys on our defensive line, you put Caldwell in there. He doesn't have to win with quickness. Dude just needs to bull rush. Plus, he can win with some quickness. But you ask him to press the pocket, and you let the edge guys of Bosa and somebody else come around the edge and collapse. Man, that's going to be a lethal pass rush for the 49ers. You look at then the ability to stop the run. Premier run defender, premier anchor inside as a wide 9 defensive tackle that can eat up double teams when they have the combo blocks that we struggled so much with last year. I'm going, okay, I really like this. You help, earn the right to rush the passer. and then you can rush the passer, and you get a premier edge guy with their. I love this idea. I think there's really I love about half these defensive linemen, but Jamari Caldwell is just a kid that is. I'm going to keep talking about him because I really like what I see over and over and over again. And he, to me, is this year's Braden Fisk for me. I was that way about Braden Fisk last year. I was, if you guys remember, I was like, I really like this kid. Really like this kid, Braden Fisk. He's showing more and showing more. And he started out going into the Senior Bowl as like a early 4th round projection, and he ended up the Rams traded up for him in the 2nd round because of his Senior Bowl and what happened at the combine. And guess what? He had a phenomenal rookie year for the Rams. So again, it's not always about the college production that helps, but you also look at the tape and see what were they asked to do, how did they perform that assignment, and that's what I'm seeing with Jamari Caldwell. As I've been watching more and more of Walter Nolan's tape, I'm not convinced this is a high 1st round guy. I'm not even convinced that he's a full on 1st round guy. I think
Really,
maybe an end of the 1st kind of prospect, but there's just too many questions about technique, about sound football play that I'm just seeing too many issues over and over again. He's really reminding me of Javon Kinlaw, where he's a phenomenal athlete, freakish athlete for a defensive tackle, but because of that, just does not. It's not going to translate the way that we will think it. It will translate to just like what we saw with Javon Kinlaw. A lot of flashes, a whole lot of times getting ejected from the hole. That happened with Javon Kinlaw a lot. There were moments where he would flash and you'd say, okay, this is the kid that they drafted high in the 1st round. And then there would be other moments where he would get ejected 5 yards out of his hole. And you're wondering, why are the 49ers giving up 9 yards almost every single carry? And that's what I'm seeing with Walter Nolan. Is he's such a good athlete. He doesn't have to have good technique so much of the time. He will just almost stand straight up and throw guys off of him. Well, you can do that in college. As you get into the NFL in the next level, that's not so. I think he's going to have a longer road to all-around success than some of these other guys. He has a high ceiling, super high ceiling, but think about it like the quarterbacks who come out and they're a phenomenal athlete, but they struggle with pocket passer fundamentals because they were always the best athlete on the field. And so if that first guy wasn't open, they could always go get 8 yards. And their coaches were always happy with that because they won a lot of games and they moved a lot of yards. That's kind of the same vibe I'm getting from Walter Nolan. I haven't finished all of his tape, but I've watched his best games. And in the games where there's a lot of highlights, there's also several moments where he's just getting washed out of a play. And so for those same things, poor technique, poor pad level, sometimes poor awareness. I don't see those issues with Jamari Caldwell. I think Jamari Caldwell is a much higher floor player than Walter Nolan. For me in this draft class, there's too many good players to be taking huge swing on a guy that can be a miss.
man, this is just going to be tough. There are so many different ways they can go. We like the defensive line, it sounds like, but the 49ers literally could go the most opposite direction. But the good thing is what you're saying, I think, is they can still pick up some quality later in the other rounds, right? I mean, the 3rd round, there still could be some of these guys.
Well,
Not
I think
literally these names, maybe.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think that the top 100 players in this year's draft is premier draft capital. So if you're at number 11 and you are not convinced that Walter Nolan is a guy to take at number 11, you're going, this draft class is so deep, we don't have to hit this guy, because if we don't, there's such a drop off to everybody that's there. I'm not even convinced of that, because again, I think he has a lower floor than a number of these other guys coming out. He has a higher ceiling, but he's more boom or bust. If you're approaching this draft and saying we have to get a certain level of quality, then you are very comfortable trading back and grabbing another pick in the top 100. You're very comfortable with that. I've been approaching this draft class and really looking at that way, going, the players from 20 to 80, especially defensive line, what's going to fall in those areas, there is not that much separation. There really isn't. And big shout out to Dre. We've been talking about maybe doing a little draft night collab. So thanks for reaching out, Dre. Make sure you like and subscribe to him over there. But I think you see Aeneas Peebles ran a really good 40 yesterday. Was showing out well in the in the measurables. Somebody that I again talked about during the Senior Bowl, Aeneas Peebles, he ran a 4.86. He was the third fastest 40-yard dash time at yesterday among defensive tackles. His 10-yard split was 1.69. So, I mean, that's up there with some of the edge guys. Broad jump 10'4", vertical 36-inch vertical, and he's 276 pounds. He's 33.5-inch arm, so good arm length. He's a player that really he showed a lot of quickness. Another kid that really showed out yesterday, and I think has flown way under the radar on this, is Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins. I talked about him during the Senior Bowl. I thought he had a solid Senior Bowl week. I went and watched his tape during the Senior Bowl. And what I was struck by was he was a similar thing with Shamar Stewart, not a lot of production in college. I went and watched the tape, and I was like, he was only on the field half the time because Georgia was literally subbing two defensive lines in that were playing 50% of the snaps. So they had a very deep, I mean, everybody who watches Georgia knows that they love to stockpile those defensive linemen. They have defensive linemen in spades. And so he was on a defensive line that he was only seeing the field half the time because they would literally swap, 8 players in on their defensive line. And he was being lined up all over the field. In one game against Notre Dame, I watched him line up in 9 different spots on the defensive line. 9 different spots. Like, it was everywhere from nose tackle in one technique to a 9 technique. But he yesterday showed out, was the third fastest 40-yard dash time. I got to pull up these numbers because I did them all last night, and I got to make sure I get these 100% correct. But he was first in the 3-cone drill, third in the 40-yard dash, second in 10-yard split among defensive tackles, first in the 20-yard shuttle, first in vertical leap, and first in broad jump among defensive tackles. So this might be the best athlete at defensive tackle that was tested at the combine. I'm not saying overall, but when you look at overall athlete, phenomenal athlete there at the combine. Again, problem of not a lot of production was among a very talented defensive line at Georgia. So somebody I would be very comfortable with looking at as being a defensive lineman with us. Darius Alexander from Toledo had a great day yesterday in all the measurables. So sorry, not getting enough coffee this morning. But I mean, there's a lot of guys that I think can come out, and we've talked about this. This is an extremely deep defensive line class, and you don't have to force anything in this class. I think that's the biggest thing. You do not have to force it.
So that brings up a question in Strawberry Reacts as well. Is it possible then, could it make sense to trade back and just get extra picks in this top 100 then?
Well, that's what I was saying. Like, you don't have to force it. If you don't believe that Shamar Stewart is going to be, a generational type player, or an all pro or premier, like top 5 player at their position, because that's what you're looking at number 11. Okay, you have 11 or 22 different positions, and I know some of those overlap. But if you're not looking at number 11, this is going to be a top 5 player at their position within the next 3 years, then you don't spend the number 11 pick on them. You let somebody else go chase that. And you say, okay, give me the 24th pick. Give me the 26th pick. Give me an extra third. Give me an extra second. I mean, really, to move up from the end of the first round to the really first half of the first round, somebody would have to give up a second round pick. You pick up an extra second round pick in this draft, man, I'm all for it. Like, I know we want to address the trenches with premier talent, but I'm telling you, this draft class is deep enough. You do not have to force it. Now, if they spend that 11th pick on somebody, then um then that means they're really convinced that this is going to be a premier player in the league. And that might be a Shamar Stewart. That might be, like a Mason Graham if he falls to the 49ers. That might be a number of guys that are projected to be in the top 10 if they slip out of that top 10 because somebody else is reaching for something in that top 10. For some reason, like a Jackson Dart goes in the first round, because for a very quarterback needy team, most people didn't think Michael Penix was going to be picked in the top 10 and that he would go to Atlanta, but he did. There's a surprise every year. And so there might be a player that you think isn't within your reach that suddenly becomes in your reach. So if there's that top 5 player that's there, then yeah, you go get that player. But if you aren't convinced that they're going to be a top 5 player, you trade back in this draft class. You pick up another defensive lineman. I think there's probably at least 15 starters in this draft class on the defensive line.
That's crazy. And that's what definitely I'll say that for this draft, I am definitely okay with trading back, where in the previous drafts, if we had done that, I would feel like, "Oh, I trust the 49ers, but I would be like, oh, what are we doing?" Whereas here, if we do that, I would be excited because it definitely means that they have a game plan of stockpiling some players in this draft because it's that stacked. So that would be obviously awesome. Um, is
Well,
there
and
anyone coming up that you're in these next few days? I mean, we've been fixated on what's happened so far, but looking
right.
ahead.
Well, I mean, definitely looking ahead, going to be looking at corners. I think that's a position where the 49ers can get tight ends. Harold Fannin has made a lot of noise. I think there's a few tight ends in this class that can really play. Jalen Higgins, I'm interested to see how his movement tests come back. He's a receiver, and he's a big receiver. Really reminds you a lot of really a Juwan Jennings with more speed, kind of almost a Jalen Hurd, very similar body size to Jalen Hurd.
Don't mention
And
Jalen Hurd.
I know. I just mentioned
Dude, I
that
put him
because
on Madden and like I was so good. Moved him
well,
up the depth chart.
I just mentioned him um, because Shanahan was so enamored with him
Me
with
too.
Jalen Hurd when he came out. So when you see somebody who reminds you of that, and that Shanahan loved him so much because of that, I go, okay, yeah. And so for those who don't know, it's Jaden Higgins. He's from Iowa State. We like those Iowa State guys, but
A little bit.
yeah. So you know, he's there, really intriguing. 6'4", 215 pounds. He's really looks like a tight end, but moves like a receiver. So, he's going to be really intriguing. I think seeing some of these other defensive linemen finish their testing over the next, today and tomorrow and everything is going to be really interesting. I really want to see Oluwafemi Oladejo's 10-yard. I think that's where he's going to shine. His 10-yard split. He's a very twitchy, bursty athlete. Apparently, he's been crushing the interviews. And there was a source or a rumor that I saw yesterday that the 49ers are very high on Oluwafemi, or as he goes by, Femi. And I had a chance to interview him at the Senior Bowl. You can catch that on my X account. Really liked him. I mean, dude is just gushing charisma, uh, gushing football passion. And so, like, just talking with the kid for 60 seconds, I was like, yeah, this kid is going to crush all these interviews. Super comfortable, but and has had a knack to be both humble and very confident at the same time, which is not common. And so just really, I another kid I fell in love with at the Senior Bowl. Didn't have the college production, but that's also because he was an off-ball linebacker that transitioned to edge. But just watching him, standing next to him on the field, the kid just oozes premier edge player. He's got everything you would like: the length, the burst, the twitch, the hands, the bend, like everything that you would like. He's got it there. And so he is a little bit more of a raw prospect. As he told me, he's still learning. He's like, I'm still learning how to use my length, how to play as an edge player. but I have the mindset of an off-ball linebacker. And so, he really, if you look at that Samson Ebicom type, that Leonard Floyd type, Femi is that, that slightly smaller but super twitchy Leo edge player. Man, that's your kid. So I mean, again, there's so many good prospects that I want in this draft. I think if you trade back and a Gray Zabel is there, you draft Gray Zabel. I mean, for interior offensive line. So that's going to be an interesting thing to see how he tests in his 3-cone, because the 3-cone, when you look at interior offensive linemen that are coming up over the next couple days, 3-cone is the test for the 49ers. How do they do? So I want to see Jackson Slater, kid from Sacramento State, that he's going to be there in testing. And so I want to see what is his 3-cone. So yeah, I really want to see that. Yeah, but and I know, like Strawberry is saying Olade has been going in the 5th and 6th round of mocks. I will tell you, Mel Kiper has him as a first rounder. So that's where it's difficult with somebody, is that how do you figure out where somebody's going to go? I understand that some mock drafts have been putting him there, but some have been putting him as high as the 1st round. The source that was the rumors yesterday, it was posted on 49erswebzone.com in their news section, was that people were linking him to the 49ers in the 2nd round. So I don't think that, he's a player that for different people, for different reasons, are going to have him on different points in the draft. There are going to be some teams that he is in the 5th round for them. There's going to be some teams that he may even have a 1st round grade. This is why the draft is so intriguing, and it's also underscores how tightly compact the talent in this draft is. Because this could be, somebody could go anywhere from the late 1st to the end of the 4th, and it's not that big of a difference in talent.
Right. Today, basically, at noon California time is when the combine starts up again. Of course, you can see it on NFL Network, and it's tight ends as well as the defensive backs go, and tight ends. And so, what I'm wondering is, we've talked a lot in the past about how after Kittle, we haven't really found. We had your guy from Alabama that you liked, and we just, over the last, I'd say, what, maybe 3-4 years, I would give us a pretty bad grade on tight end. Is there anyone today that we could be looking at? Is that so far down our needs that it's like, not really?
Well, I mean, obviously Harold Fannin from Bowling Green. I think Elijah Arroyo is an interesting kid to look at. He had a decent week at the Senior Bowl. Terrence Ferguson from Oregon was really good at the Senior Bowl. I think
These
somebody
Oregon
to
guys, man.
look. Well, I mean, look, you're talking about Oregon was in the top, echelon uh, of college football teams, and they have been for a
Oh, for
very
sure.
long time. So
Yeah.
as much as I don't like Oregon, I'm not an Oregon Duck. I grew up in Oregon, and I was an Oregon State Beaver because we had Steven Jackson and and stuff back in the Dennis Erickson days. That's where I was. I think CJ Dupree from Alabama. I know.
Oh gosh.
Look, I will tell you, I went into the Senior Bowl and I was like, I'm sorry, Dupree. I cannot be on board with you because stinking Cam Latu burned me so bad. I was like, Alabama, and
Yeah.
it worked out so poorly. But I will tell you, it wasn't just me who was really high on Dupree. Okay, Wayne was there, Steph was there, Brad was there, all of us in concert. They actually won me over to Dupree. I was like, I don't want to buy it. And they were all 3 of them like, dude, this kid can play. This kid's got some skills. They were like, you need to be easier on the kid. And I'm like, I just don't see it. I just don't. What do you not see? I'm like, because he's from Alabama and I got burned by
Yeah.
Latu. And Brad was like, you were a Latu truther? I was like, yes, I was.
Like, oh
Um,
man.
and so, but CJ Dupree, I will say I'm interested to see how he does. Thomas Fidone from Fidone, I'm not sure. From Nebraska, Jackson Hawes from Georgia Tech. I think those as tight ends for me are guys that will really well at the Senior Bowl that I'm interested to see how they start testing out.
Yeah, Shifty brings up, this is a little out there, Shifty. Random trade scenario. 49ers number 11 overall for Falcons 15 overall and Kyle Pitts. Good Lord.
I
No
ain't doing
way,
that. But
Shifty.
that doesn't move the needle enough. I mean, look, in the sense that, okay, yeah, well, what are you going to do with George Kittle for the next 3 to 4 years? George Kittle's got another 3 to 4 years in there. I know we need a second tight end, but I mean, nah, no. I would much rather trade Debo and the number 11 overall pick to Washington for Jonathan Allen and their number 1 overall pick. Or their first rounder, which is going to be near the end of it's going to be like what, pick number 29, I think. Or
Yeah, they were good
28,
this
somewhere in
year,
there.
so obviously
So I would be perfectly fine with that trade. Debo and number 11 for Jonathan Allen and their 28, 29. Because I think you're going to get a phenomenal player at 28, 29. So
yeah, they have the 29th pick and then the
yes,
61st overall in round 2, 79th overall in round 3.
yeah. I mean, I would totally do that. I would do that in a heartbeat. Because Debo obviously wants a fresh start. I think he would fit really well there with what Washington has been doing. And you get Jonathan Allen, a premier defensive tackle and a proven commodity. That changes your defensive line. So and then you can pick up Gray Zabel if he's there at the end of the first round. You can trade back into the early second and then pick up another second round pick or a third round pick, or 2 picks or maybe even a pick next year in 2026. There's a lot of options there. I think this is going to be a really fascinating draft process coming up because there are so many players that are being rumored out there in trade talks. I think this deep defensive line class has led to that. There's so many players that are quality. I think that there's so much quality that can be had in the first 3-4 rounds. This is going to be one of the more fascinating drafts I think we've seen in a while because there's not as much like these guys are locked in your top 10 to 30 players, guys ranked between 10 and 30. Like in most years you go into it and that sort of kind of range is pretty locked in. Like everybody has a pretty good consensus that these are the 10 to 30th ranked players in the league or in the draft. That we may have a little bit of difference in order, but everybody understands that those are the guys in kind of these different blocks. This is a draft where I'm not certain that that's the case, and there's going to be a lot of movement. This is a fun off season. If there was any season for the 49ers to have the number 11 overall pick and have a bunch of needs and be able to address all of those in one off season, this is it. Like this is a fun off season.
Yeah, and get guys healthy like McCaffrey and Greenlaw. Well, we'll see what happens with Greenlaw. But so here's an interesting thing too that I want to give you guys. I've my company pays for the paid version of ChatGPT, and when I explained about what time the combine comes on today and some other things, the Washington Commanders draft picks, I just quickly typed in ChatGPT to get those answers. And what I just did is typed into Chat GPT, what do you think the 49ers will do in this draft? And it's interesting, and I want to share what it said. So it says that they need to focus on their offensive and defensive lines. And then the first pick it says is Kelvin Banks, offensive tackle. Banks is noted for his versatility and could be a candidate to succeed veteran left tackle Trent Williams. Then the next one is Mason Graham from Michigan. He's recognized for his ability to disrupt the interior line, addressing the 49ers' need for a formidable defensive presence. And then shout out to Strawberry Reacts again, because they mentioned Armand Bembu, an
Embu,
offensive tackle
Embu.
from Missouri, and who has shown significant potential, could be valuable addition to the offensive line. And then prospects like Will Johnson, and Curtis Rourke are the two mentioned by ChatGPT, which I just found that pretty fascinating, seeing how these are the exact names that we've been talking about. And ChatGPT does not know that. All I simply said was, what do you think the 49ers will do in the draft? And it's just interesting to see.
Well, and so let's kind of pit the big AI against each other. So I put this into Grok to see what Grok 3 would spit out. And this is interesting. So they say basically the 49ers have a bunch of picks. It gives me a good kind of rundown of what they're looking at in their draft picks. And says likely priorities. Number one, offensive line. The 49ers offensive line struggled in 2024, particularly with injuries and inconsistent play outside of left tackle Trent Williams, who will be 37 in 2025. Right tackle Colton McKivitz and left guard Aaron Banks, a pending free agent, are areas of concern. Grok knows. Analysts widely expect them to target a top offensive tackle or guard early. Prospects like LSU's Will Campbell, Texas's Kelvin Banks Jr., or Minnesota's Ariante Irsay could be in play at number 11 to eventually succeed Williams or bolster the right side. The draft is considered deep with offensive linemen through 4 rounds, aligning with their multiple high picks. 2, defensive line. Injuries and lackluster production plagued the interior defensive line in 2024, with Javon Hargrave likely to be released for cap savings. Adding a disruptive defensive tackle like Michigan's Mason Graham, touted as a dream scenario by draft analyst Daniel Jeremiah, or Texas A&M's Shamar Stewart, could be a priority to improve run defense and pressure. Edge rusher depth alongside Nick Bosa is also a consideration, though less urgent. And then they have secondary after that. Potential strategies: stay at number 11 and pick a starter. Most mock drafts see the 49ers staying put and grabbing an immediate contributor. And so they talk about that as possibles like Graham Johnson, or offensive tackles like Josh Simmons from Ohio State, frequently linked. GM John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have a history of targeting linemen early and suggesting this trend might continue. There's also the trade down. Some mocks propose trading back. Example, to number 16 with Arizona for an extra second rounder to accumulate more picks while still landing a starter like tackle Armand Embu. This fits Lynch's emphasis on drafting young, cost-controlled talent to sustain the roster, especially with looming cap constraints from Purdy's extension. Or 3, focus on depth. With 7 picks in the top 138, they could spread selections across both lines, secondary, and perhaps a developmental wide receiver if Deebo Samuel is traded. A rumor swirling this offseason. Their 2024 rookie class showed the value of mid-round contributors. And then it has what NFL experts are saying. Now, finally, we have Grok's take. The 49ers will likely prioritize the trenches, offensive or defensive line at number 11, giving their 2024 weaknesses and Shanahan and Lynch's drafting tendencies. If a top tackle like Campbell or Banks falls, they'll snag him to protect Purdy and sustain their run-heavy scheme. If not, a defensive lineman like Graham or Stewart makes sense to bolster a defense that faltered. Trading down is tempting with their extra picks, but only if they're confident in landing a starter later. They won't reach for a quarterback or skill position early with Purdy locked in and other needs pressing. So I think that's a pretty good summary by Grok.
That's what we've been saying. I mean, AI. I joked and said that I am actually AI. Johnny just paid for this this bot to help host the show. But yeah, AI is very interesting. It helps me with the couple companies that I run for sure. But yeah, that's pretty fun. And obviously,
what's going to be what's going to change everything in this and make this really fascinating is free agency. Free agency comes in here in just 2 weeks, and it's going to come in a full 6 weeks before the draft. And free agency will disrupt. It's kind of like the Senior Bowl. The Senior Bowl shows up and it disrupts everybody's mock drafts. Then the Combine shows up and it disrupts everybody's mock drafts. And then you have free agency. And then it's like throwing a hand grenade in to everybody's mock drafts. So, we'll see because it'll tell you, how pressing are different needs. And it tells you how confident teams are that they can get a starter. Like if the team doesn't go after a defensive lineman, then that tells you they are confident that they will snag a starter somewhere in this draft. That's how confident they are. It really tells you how confident teams are in certain draft, like positional draft groups. So,
yeah, love to see it. Chris Juvenal says, "Chat JPT ain't got nothing on Johnny Dell."
Yeah, give it about a year because it's training itself right now. So
for sure. It's like Keanu Reeves in The Matrix. How do you feel? I know Kung Fu. That's one of my favorite lines. And he's like, show me. They go at it for a couple minutes. That choreography is dope. All right. So again, be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast if you have not already. It is very hard to believe if you have not already. We've only been saying it for 2 years straight. Show your phone to a fellow Niner fan. Make sure you show them your favorite video of what Johnny has done. He works, dude, unbelievably hard. He'll text me late at night, like, "Oh, dude, this video." I mean, he works really hard, guys, and it's really cool to see, really cool to be a part of. I'm always thankful and grateful for you guys as well in the chat. So remember to hit the notification bell. We'll have a lot to talk about as the combine wraps up. So check out NFL Network and Johnny's X channel as well. He posts a bunch of stuff on X as well. So follow us there. In the meantime, in between time, stay safe, stay healthy, and as always, go Niners and Giants.